So moving on to the next vehicle, it's the Storm Eagle Assault Gunship. Now, the Storm Eagle mounts fearsome firepower for a vehicle of its size and is capable of transporting 20 Space Marines in power armor into combat. It generally has the following weapon systems: a hull-mounted set of either twin-linked heavy bolters, twin-linked multi-melters, or a Typhoon missile launcher, a hull-mounted Vengeance launcher, and a pair of twin-linked las cannons, or a set of 4 Hellstrike missiles.
Now we get back into trying to transport 20 tons of cargo and still be a fighter. We all thought the Thunderhawk was bad.
Yeah.
This atrocity boasts a longer, less aerodynamic body and shorter wings. I'm sorry. What? It almost hit lift-to-drag ratio of 5.0, which is the maximum the wind tunnel can actually measure. It came out to 4.987. To describe it as anything other than a flying brick would be a disservice to every other aircraft in existence. I'm trying to be nice. This is me being nice. We had to build. We could not actually get access to a model of this one. We had to actually build a foam plastic sit-in. It just, I can't sit by on this one. It does not. It simply doesn't fly. There's no way. Even if it did fly, it would have a turning radius the size of the Atlantic Ocean, and that's not an exaggeration. That's close to literally being how long it would take this thing to turn around at full speed. Because as lift to drag gets higher, the turning circle gets exponentially bigger.
Yeah.
Well, not necessarily the Atlantic Ocean, but it couldn't. Its turning circle would be about the size of the island of Iceland. And that's
still a pretty big circle, though.
That is to say, it would start at one end of the island, and by the time it got to the other end, it would be about 90 degrees turned around, and then another length of the island, it would finish turning around. So maneuverability-wise, not happening. Lift-to-drag ratio, just getting off the ground, you're looking at nearly 10 million newtons of force. To illustrate how much 10 million is, I'm actually gonna have to look this up just to make sure. Force of a nuclear bomb. It's gonna be close. Yeah. So at 10 million newtons, it's about a 20. It's 1/5 of the power of a nuclear explosion to get this thing off the ground.
Yeah, it doesn't seem practical, really, does it?
Doesn't seem practical or possible. You're talking about an aircraft that, when it tries to take off, destroys the runway it's sitting on.
Admittedly, it's quite a funny image. Like, prepare for takeoff, boom.
It is quite a funny image, and that's not even that's assuming it's actually loaded with 30 Space Marines, because you have to remember the aircraft weighs 68 tons. If we load 30 Space Marines onto it,
20,
excuse me, 20. If we load 20 Space Marines onto it, I don't know why I said 30, because my calculation shows this correctly. If we load 20 Space Marines onto it, each one of them weighing 2 tons, then it's 108 tons of weight to get off the ground.
Not taking into account their equipment either.
That's just them in their power armor with their power packs. That's not. You're right. That's not taking into account their guns, their equipment. This thing also claims it carries a dreadnought with those. There comes a point where I'm like, how do you get this off the ground without killing everyone?
Simple. They use orc logic. They believe it can fly, it will fly. Orc logic.
Max speed of 2,000 kilometers is, again, relatively slow for a modern aircraft, unless you're just a transport aircraft, which this thing hopefully is just a transport aircraft. 30,000 kilometer range is, again, pathetic. especially for something that's expected to be spacefaring. Armament-wise, dear Imperium, can we take some guns off of these things? Heresy. They might fly. But
getting rid of guns is heresy.
Armament-wise is insane, as usual. 48 missiles. To illustrate how much 48 missiles is, a B-52 Stratofortress loaded with 1,000-pound bombs only carries 46,000-pound bombs.
Yeah. You can never have too much DACA, though. That's the point. You can never too much DACA.
I don't know what else to say about it. It carries all the firepower in the world. It has plenty of armor. 45 millimeters of armor is excessive for an aircraft unless it's being shot at by a las cannon, which it probably is. Granted, it probably is being shot at by a las cannon.
Yeah.
But they need to extend the wingspan by about triple what it is at 11.8 meters in order for it to have a chance of really truly getting off the ground.
So a bit of a brick, but not the brick, because the brick is next. The Cestus Assault Ram. Now, these are similar in size to a Thunderhawk or a boarding torpedo and designed to participate in close-range boarding actions in space. It's compact and heavily armoured and designed basically just to ram into other ships in order to deliver its cargo.
Well,
and
okay.
I think we can safely say, just by looking at it, it's not aerodynamic in the slightest.
So, we had to build a foam plastic mock-up. The wind tunnel maxed out and did not actually give me a lift-to-drag ratio number. Because it said it was not measurable. Because it was the equivalent of blowing the wind tunnel at a brick wall.
Pretty much.
It does not fly. I don't care what the Imperium says. If it enters atmosphere, it crashes to the ground at terminal velocity and kills everyone inside.
Now, admittedly, in space, this isn't going to be an issue. But in
space, this is not going to be an issue. In space, this actually works. It can fly in space. However, they gave it landing gear, which made me look at it and go, did they expect this to land on a planet?
It just drops.
I can just imagine the Space Marines be like, all right, prepare for landing, and then suddenly they're in an out of control nosedive straight at the ground with the thrusters accelerating them past terminal velocity to slam into the earth.
Kinetic bombardment at its finest.
As far as if it could actually somehow, by a miracle of the Omnissiah and Zinch, fly, it would have about as much thrust as a thermonuclear warhead behind it. And therefore, when it slams into a ship in space with its mass, I don't care how big your ship is. Because even a Retribution-class battleship would feel the depth of impact from one of these at that much thrust and speed. And you could go, well, it's, massive. And I'm like, no, you don't understand. You understand. In space, you have effectively only your mass to stop you from going in a direction. When you are slammed into something, equal and opposite reaction still happens. One of these things slamming into a Retribution-class battleship with their comparative mass and weight would actually slow it down by 14 meters a second. So a full flight of these slamming into said battleship would actually have a chance of bringing it to a standstill.
Well, there you go.
But it's not going to fly. There's no way. It's the equivalent of hurling a sledgehammer into the air and expecting it to continue going.
Well, I'm sure pretty much everyone has seen that comic that's been going around online by now. You got an Eldar Farseer, sees an eagle, goes, "What a beautiful creature, I must design an aircraft based on it." A Tau sees a manta ray, "What a beautiful creature, I must design an aircraft based on it." And a Tech Marine sees a brick. That's most of these aircraft in a nutshell.
Yeah.
So, moving on, we're going to take a look at Space Marine landing craft, which are large orbital assault vehicles designed to quickly deliver vehicles and troops to a planet's surface. Within 20 or 30 seconds of leaving their spacecraft, any troops and vehicles will be on the ground and in action. It's armed with various weapon systems such as multiple storm bolters, twin-linked heavy bolters, turret-mounted las cannons, and large hydraulic clamps used to transport Space Marine tanks in a similar fashion to a Thunderhawk transporter.
Okay. So, we had to build a plastic mock-up of this. We did include everything it claims to be transporting in the plastic mock-up. It has a lift-to-drag ratio of could not be measured.
That's 2.
For it to actually get off the ground with 6 dreadnoughts and 4 land raiders loaded with terminators, plus its own weight and everything else, would require 19,180,406 newtons of force. That assumes that it has a lift to drag, and I'm just assuming it has a lift to drag ratio of 9. Because that's the lift to drag ratio of a brick wall.
So since this one didn't generate a lift to drag ratio, are you saying that brick wall is more aerodynamic?
Sadly, yes.
How does that even work?
Well, as the wind tunnel's blowing at it, the wind actually separates along it, and what ended up happening was the stuff it was transporting was actually causing the wind to get caught in wind traps and funnel back out, and then the same wind particles would get caught in the next wind trap and funnel back out. So it is experiencing passing through the same air multiple times.
I'd never thought I'd hear a day where I'd find out there's a Space Marine aircraft that's less aerodynamic than a brick wall.
Whereas a brick wall, the air hits and then goes around it. This, the air hits, goes under it, gets caught by the Land Raider it's transporting, which then goes up into the cranny between the Land Raider and the transport craft, funnels itself back out, goes under the Land Raider, and then gets caught in the next Land Raider.
Oh dear.
For this thing to fly, it would have to have a wingspan 3 times as large as a B-52 Stratofortress. Instead, it has a wingspan of a total of 14 meters. With no... And here's what makes it a little worse. There's no central wings. There's some little forward wings, and then the main wings are at the rear of the aircraft, but there's no central wings to create centralized lift around the main weight of the body and the load it's carrying. On top of this, the wings are not vectored in any way to provide additional thrust, to provide additional lift for the thrust being thrown into it. I am sorry, all you Warhammer 40K fans. However, after taking 32 hours of engineering courses at Rutgers and having 12 hours of on-ground flight instruction, this thing cannot fly.
Which means there's one more vehicle on this list that might have a hope of flying, then again it probably won't. And this last vehicle we're taking a look at today is the Stormbird. Now, the Stormbird was essentially the predecessor to the Thunderhawk, which was... and is larger and less agile than a Thunderhawk, which should give you some idea of what this thing is like. It can carry up to 50 armoured marines into battle. Alternatively, it can carry up to 5 dreadnoughts, including the gigantic Leviathan-class dreadnoughts, jump-pack infantry, rapier batteries, bikes, jet bikes, rhino armoured transports, or a mixed force. Its armour included 4 turret-mounted twin-linked las cannons, 3 twin-linked heavy bolters, a complement of 6 Dreadstrike missiles, and was also equipped with particularly dense composite armor plating and further projected by void shield generators.
Okay. So we had to build a mock-up of this one. It came out to 3.891 lift-to-drag ratio, with a wingspan of 3 to 4 wings to body. Now we have to make some assumptions about its weight and use that to help extrapolate just how big it actually is. Claims that it can carry 50 Space Marines are one thing, but each Marine requires 2 cubic meters of space in order for him to move, operate, and stand inside the aircraft while he's wearing his armor and carrying a weapon. I estimate it takes another 1.1 cubic meters for harnesses for the Marines as well as for other amenities like a power pack charger to be hooked up to their power packs. Taking this into account, the aircraft needs an additional 480 meters of space in order to accommodate its crew, weapon pods, fuel tanks, and subsystems. Then it needs 292 cubic meters per engine. That means it is a total of 927 cubic meters of space. Almost a cubic kilometer. This means that using all of its dimensional ratios, I have come to the conclusion that it is 152 meters across, 26 meters tall, and 749 meters long, with a wingspan of 562 meters.
That's big.
Coming away from all of this, it weighs roughly 622 tons fully loaded.
And the thing is, in regards to the wings, which I've just found out just now, apparently the wings on these are capable of folding or collapsing in some manner as well, as in the novel Horus Rising it states that the Stormbirds, quote, sat in 2 rows of 3 wings extended.
Yes, which means it has a flight mode and a combat mode. To get off the ground with 622 tons at 3.819 lift to drag using 9.8 meters per second gravity times 1,000 newtons for each little bit of thrust required, you need 23,771,979 newtons of force to fly. Can those 4 engines output that? I have no idea. I don't know any engines that can throw around that kind of force. But if this vehicle had that, more than likely what would happen is you would turn on the engines and they would shear off of the aircraft from the force they output.
Which, again, is a hilarious visual.
That much said, it is completely armed to the teeth with the capability of carrying a full platoon, or roughly a quarter of a company of Marines. Good luck dealing with that.
Yes, especially if it decides to drop in 5 Leviathan Dreadnoughts right in front of you.
Now the good news is, because its lift to drag isn't nearly as terrible as a space shuttle, it only takes 192 kilometers to pull a 180-degree turn, which by dog's fighting standards is completely laughable, but by the standards of the 40K universe, it seems relatively good.
Oh dear.
This is not an aircraft. It's a satellite space station orbiting the Earth. Because its engines require as much force as a rod from God railgun dropped by satellite onto Earth to get it off the ground.
But is it more aerodynamic than a Thunderhawk?
Yes. Sadly.
So the older version is the better version.
The older version is the better version, even if it is 6 times the weight.
Oh dear, so...
I'm sorry, I've been trying not to laugh this entire time. We were sitting there doing the math, and for instance, when we looked at the Celestis assault ram, Every engineer in the room saw the mock-up model and died laughing when we put it in the wind tunnel.
Well, yeah, it's a brick. In fact, it's 2 bricks taped together.
The bad one was when we were sitting there watching the marine landing craft with the stuff it carries rigged onto it and seeing the wind in the wind tunnel go and then come back and you're hitting the same air particles over and over again. Everyone just sat there in stunned silence for like 6 seconds and looked at me and I said, well, they asked me to do this and I did pay to rent the wind tunnel, so I guess we're doing it.
So all these aircraft we've looked at today, we've had, what, 2 that would actually be practical?
We've had 2 that would actually be practical and have a good chance of flying and doing their job.
3 if you want to be generous and include the Stormbird.
Assuming you could find engines that output that kind of thrust that don't immediately shear off the aircraft, yes. I still have this comical image of all the Marines being fully loaded, and then they go, you ready? All right, take off. What happened? The engine sheared off, sir. What?
And then it just cuts to some wandering orc going, so, what's that over there? Ow.
It's like, sir, we report the enemy has been destroyed. Awesome. How? By the engines of our aircraft slamming into them.
Oh, dear.
Wait, what? So, Space Marines, you've started Aeronautica off to an inglorious start of why. Why do you have this?
They got 2 out of 7 in regards to they got just under 30% of their aircraft are actually flyable.
30% of their aircraft are flyable and capable of doing the things that they claim to be capable of doing.
And 30% are less aerodynamic than a brick wall.
Yeah.
I never thought I'd say that. But
I honestly did not. I didn't think it was going to be this bad until we started putting stuff into the wind tunnel, and then I was just like, I don't know how to fix this.
Well, hopefully, in the next episode, where we'll be taking a look at the Eldar, we might get some better results. So this wraps up this pilot edition of Aeronautica. Thank you very much for joining us. This has been Remnants from 40K Theories.
And this has been Fiaura, and at this point, I think he intends the pun.
Yes, I couldn't resist. Yeah, thank you very much for joining us, and we'll see you again next time. Bye-bye.